Good morning and welcome to this Accountability and Performance meeting on the 15th of January. I'm Jonathan Ashedwood, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire. I'm joined by Andy Proffitt, Chief Constable of Hertfordshire Constabulary. Welcome to members of the public joining us for this meeting. These meetings help me fulfil my statutory duty to hold the Chief Constable to account for the performance and work of Hertfordshire Constabulary, and we webcast them live and make a recording available for public transparency. There's no ability for members of the public to ask questions. It is on broadcast only mode, but we hope you find it useful nonetheless. We've got 4 agenda items that we're going to cover this morning. We'll cover them in this order: firearms licensing, progress update on appeal inspection recommendations, particularly on crime investigation and crime solving, project vigilance, and some public protection updates that we're going to revisit. So we're going to start off then with firearms licensing. It's a subject we've covered a number of occasions in these meetings. We're revisiting it again following the publication of a cause of concern letter by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary last week that came out of a national thematic inspection that looked at a number of police forces, including Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire. And we're still in the window of the forces providing their action plan to the Inspectorate, but there's a number of points that I wanted to raise for this meeting, and it continues to be an area of some public concern. So Chief Constable, good morning. Perhaps I could just start by asking you for an update on the current status of renewals and new applications in terms of those performance metrics, because notwithstanding the points that the Inspectorate have rightly raised, there has been progress being made on those, and where are we at the moment with that performance?
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. So I'll give you numbers that are Hertfordshire only. As you rightly say, the collaborated function is shared across the 3 counties of Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire. But in our county of Hertfordshire, in terms of people waiting for a renewal of a licence, the last data is 761 people. And of those, 402 are in excess of the 120 days with which we aim to process that renewal by. And there are 715 people waiting for a new grant, so they're applying for the first time, and 597 of those have waited for more than 120 days. So in total, 1,476 people either waiting for a renewal or a new grant. That's out of a total of nearly 4,400 across the 3 forces.
Thank you for that. And those figures, we've been tracking those coming down over the last year or so. And if you could give me some context to some of the increase in the processing rate and decision rate, that would be useful perhaps to just understand the context of where some of that progress has been seen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, I will. We have been improving, and I think I want to say at the outset, I recognise not quickly enough, but we have been improving. When I started as Chief Constable in January last year, we identified really early this was a problem area of business for us, and it had been a growing problem for a period of time prior to that. Hence why in early 2025, Hertfordshire Constabulary, one of the 3 forces, put in additional resourcing. 10 additional people went into the firearms licensing team. The other forces sought to invest in efficiency and technology, which hasn't sadly yet yielded a dividend for us, and are now investing additional resources alongside Hertfordshire, which is good to see. Notwithstanding that, in last year, 2025, across the collaboration, there were 5,148 pieces of work done, either new grants or renewals, 5,148. That compared to the previous year, 2024, 2,166. So we more than doubled the amount of things we did last year, not exclusively, but in part because of the additional resource we put in Hertfordshire. That is not quick enough. We need to make it even quicker without compromising safety, but we have made progress. We have more work to do.
Thank you, that's useful, and that, I think that context is important in the context of some of the things we'll go on to talk about, because His Majesty's Inspectorate's conclusions are at a moment in time in a journey of progress, and that kind of doubling, more than doubling, over a year in terms of decision making is reflective of some of the challenges that have existed for a long time, as you say, and some of the scale of the pace and change needed. Thank you for that context. Perhaps if we can move on to the Inspectorate's letter and appreciating we're still in the window for the Foxes to produce the action plan. Perhaps if you could just give me an overview of the Constabulary's response to the judgments made by the Inspectorate.
Thank you. So His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary is completely independent of policing. They came in November, looked at Bedfordshire, Cambridge and Hertfordshire, as well as a number of other firearms licensing functions in the country, and they published their report last week, which said effectively a cause of concern, that the constabularies, the three, needed to do much better, citing issues with pace and rigour through which we were dealing with firearms licences in the collaboration. And the key findings were overall the business wasn't managed efficiently and effectively. There are significant backlogs that I've just talked to you about, that there is an insufficiently good case management system to process how we do this work, and fundamentally there are not enough people doing the work. They were the headlines that they came up with, as well as some other things around that the constabularies need to ensure that the risk assessment process that we go through is fit for purpose and doesn't compromise public safety.
Thank you, and you and the other two Chief Constables and the three PCCs have accepted those findings in full.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Can I ask how the collaboration is addressing the concern that was raised around whether the desk-based process for shotgun renewals carries risks? So this was something that was being looked at around the kind of risk profiling of that work. How's that being looked at or reconsidered?
Thank you. So yes, the Inspectorate has asked us a question of, does our what we call a risk-based renewal process, is it effective? So what we have done through the autumn is we've looked at where individuals ask for renewal of a licence and there's no adverse intelligence or information to suggest anything has changed. We have streamlined the process through which that person gets their licence, with the obvious logic being if there's nothing to suggest something's changed, we want to get that licence to that member of community as soon as we reasonably and safely can. The Inspectorate has asked us to double check that in the streamlining of that process we aren't missing any potential risks. So as a result of the question that we've been asked, I have commissioned an urgent review, 2 weeks, of that process to be reported in detail back to me and my two colleagues, the other two chiefs of Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire, so we can understand that, satisfy ourselves that it is safe, public safety is not compromised, or we need to amend what we do. And of course, as you know, Commissioner, you and your Commissioner counterparts have asked to understand in detail our response to all the recommendations, and clearly therefore this is something that we'll be talking to you about as well.
Thank you. I welcome that, and yes, as you've highlighted it, it's sort of that needing to get pace around decision making, but without compromising the risk is really key to that work, isn't it? So I welcome that work that you've set in train there. Thank you. You've touched upon the additional resources that you put in last year on the Hertfordshire side of the work, and more needed. What steps are you taking to ensure there are enough and sustainable resources in that function to manage the workload?
Thank you, Commissioner. A really important question, and one of the key findings from HMIC, not enough people to do the business, which we accept in full. So 18 months ago, roughly speaking, the size of this collaborated team was 39.5 posts. As a result of the decisions we have taken and now will take, the overall size of the team will go up to 88 posts. So we've already increased by 25 posts, which includes over the last 18 months, and we are going to put a further 24 posts in there across the collaboration, which we think will give us the capacity to do the rate of business that we need to transact upon to start to quickly recover over the course of the next 12 months. The real challenge, and I don't underestimate this in any way, shape or form in terms of rural communities and licence holders, firearms holders waiting to get their firearms, so we can get this right, done faster without compromising safety. So 25 extra in already, another 24 going in, and I'm talking weeks, not waiting a long time. And those people will get, and this is an important point to re-emphasise, they will get bespoke, nationally approved training from the College of Policing, so we know the people are in, they've got all the right skills, and therefore hopefully they can hit the ground running and start to make even more of a difference.
Thank you, and the combination of those two uplifts, the one that you did last year and the one that's being done now, as you say, in a matter of weeks, is a more than doubling of the number of posts in that in that team, and does that give you confidence, given some of the review you've already commissioned, for example, that that's likely to be sufficient, or are you expecting to have to review that further at some point?
We will review this weekly. We have confidence that this is the right investment to make, but we will not be complacent and say, well, let's come back in 6 months and check this is working. There is a weekly performance management group chaired by my Deputy Chief Constable, supported by the Deputy Chief Constable and the other 3 forces, to manage this business week to week. So are the people in? Are they trained? Are they doing their job as efficiently and effectively as should be? And are we starting to make progress against the backlogs? That will be reported to the Chief Constables every single month, and we will report to you as Commissioners, so you can hold us to account for the progress or otherwise every single month. So we think it's the right investment, but we'll keep it under active review.
Thank you for that. You talked about some of the challenges with the case management system. What steps are being taken to get that into an effective and efficient place?
So we have a new case management system. It's called Felix. I don't entirely know why it's called Felix, but it's called Felix, and it is a case management system that was being introduced in November. When HMIC came in to inspect, it wasn't mature, hence their commentary that we need to have an effective case management system. We've started to populate all our new work onto it, so new renewals coming in, new applications coming in, but we are still putting some of the backlogs of things we haven't done onto that system. That is being prioritised. Part of this resource coming in will help us to do that, and this new system will be far easier to use for the people in the licensing teams. They'll be able to see, based on risk, red, amber, green, however they define that risk, based on age of application, where their priorities sit, and prioritise their workload accordingly. So this system will help them be better at what they need to do.
Thank you. The Inspectorate raised a question around the consistency in standard operating procedures across the 3 forces, particularly around things like seizing and revoking licences, and it was a consistency point rather than anything else. How's that being addressed across the collaboration of the 3 forces?
It has been addressed. The Inspectorate came in and rightly identified that some of the documentation, and it's important documentation when we're making important risk-based decisions, was not up to date. The right signatories weren't on all of the forms. The authorities that we gave to various different people to do different things weren't completely up to date and needed to be accepted in full, and those documents have been changed, so we're in the right place now in terms of our documented governance of how we do business.
Thank you. Communication has been a kind of ongoing challenge, and you see it in the kind of public complaints that come in from the firearms community, and one of those relates to the backlog of email correspondence that there's been, again, highlighted by the Inspectorate, which gives some challenges around people actually just knowing where they are in the system, and actually creates some workload and demand for the team, I know. What's the plan to address that backlog of correspondence, ensuring it doesn't contain kind of risk information that needs to be dealt with, and try and get onto an even keel in terms of the public being able to contact the team and getting a timely response.
There were over 2,000 emails on our system where the inspectorate said, well, have you managed the risk that may be contained within those, and have you responded to those people who emailed in? In terms of the risk question, the emails were triaged, and we are comfortable that the risk issues, where there were any, have been picked out. But we didn't answer individually those people who emailed in, which I think, there's no nice way to say it. We should have done and we hadn't. That was a resourcing issue, and we didn't have enough people to do it. So the approach we are going to take is that every single one of those email senders will get a response from us. It will be a generic response to all 2,000 plus people to say, here are the things that you can do to help yourself, because the types of information people are asking is, when is my licence going to be issued? When's the renewal going to be done? To clear that down, but within that email they will get, it will say, if this information we've sent you, or the information we provided, has not answered your question, contact us back on this email when we've got these new people in, and then we will, from that base point, commit to responding to people personally and promptly in terms of the issue they bring in. So we get ourselves up to provide a proper response, rather than trying to trawl our way back through 2,000 emails where we think we just need to start properly from a base point.
And so effectively the commitment you're giving to the public who might be in that pile of emails is that within the coming weeks they will receive some information that might answer the query that they had, but there will be a mechanism for them to come back if it doesn't and get a timely response.
That's exactly it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and that's helpful. And I think we'll address quite a number of the concerns that the stakeholders have around that. You touched a little bit around the when we were referring to the standard operating procedure, some of the delegated authorities, and making sure those are in the right place, and you've taken action around that. What's been done linked to that to ensure that the staff who have those delegated authorities have got the right training, skills and support for the roles that they are being delegated to do?
We have spoken to the College of Policing, so that's a national body that oversees all standards of professional practice of how we do our business, so including firearms licensing, and on the week of the 23rd of February, the College of Policing are coming into the 3 counties, and they are delivering a bespoke training programme to make sure everybody who's there now and the new people who I've talked about have the very latest and very best training so they can do their business quickly, promptly and safely.
Thank you. And kind of linked to that, what have you been doing to kind of learn from other forces that have addressed some of these challenges previously? Because although there's some specific challenges for Beds, Cams and Herts, they've not been completely unique either.
No. So and I say this in no way seeking to be in any way ambivalent to the problems that we're talking about here. We need to improve, but we have over the last year visited a number of other forces, sought peer reviews from other forces in terms of how we improve, and some of the consistent themes that have come out of resourcing is a critical factor in how you do business, and that the training that people get and the clarity they have of their roles is key to moving it forward. Go back here to some of the things we've talked about previously, Commissioner, and this is a really tricky period in the 5-year cycle for our collaboration. So we have invested, we haven't done enough, we will improve, and we need to absolutely kind of maximise our engine and our capacity to get through this peak, and we will do.
Thank you very much for those updates, and I think you've described quite a lot in train there in terms of the review you've done, you've put in place around the risk-based renewal process, more than doubling of the team going in, new case management system, a plan to deal with the email correspondence, more training, more people, etc. And of course, on the back of that, more than doubling of actually doing the decisions. So quite a lot in there I'm hearing. Obviously, commissioners will see the action plan in due course, and no doubt we'll be coming back to to this through various governance and accountability meetings. But thank you for those updates for today. I'm going to go on to our next agenda item, which is an update on one of the areas from the Peel inspection from the end of 2024, and to have a look at progress being made around crime investigation in particular. And there's obviously an objective in the police and crime plan and in the force plan as well around solving more crime. So what progress is being made by the constabulary generally to solve more crime?
Thank you, Commissioner. We are solving more crime. I'm pleased to say it's a fundamental part of what we're here to do, prevent bad things happening, and when it does, catch the criminals and solve the crime. We've solved 1,336 more crimes in 2025 than in 2024. That's nowhere near enough, but we are solving more crime. When I look, and this is an improving picture of performance. I am really working hard with my team to make sure that we do even better in this place. So if I look at the last 3 months, so October to December in 2025 compared to the same 3 months in 2024, we solved 574 more crimes in that period. And if you turn that into what percentage of crime are we solving, that's 11.5 up to over 14% of crime solved. We're solving more crime. I'm not complacent with it. I want to solve much more than that. And if I look at January to date, we're only 15 days into January, we've solved nearly 1 in 5 crimes. And that's more towards comparatively the top end of the country. That's my ambition that we've talked about before. More victims having their crimes solved, burglary, robbery, car theft, shop theft, drug dealing, and that my officers are out there, which they want to be, are inquisitive, they're doing stop checks in our communities, they're stopping cars, they're visible in our high streets and our parks, they know where the hotspot areas are, and they're proactive in their policing. So we're really pushing this hard. It's steady, slow progress, but we are making progress. Underpinning all of that is a crime investigation and victim support plan that one of my ACCs is personally driving, and that, without going into all the detail, is based on building investigative skills, having good performance oversight from my senior leaders so they know what crime's happening and how they're tackling it and who's working hard and who needs to do a bit better. Looking at kind of bringing in national best practice from the college and outside, making sure that we're using technology and efficiency, and that we're rewarding our people where they're doing well, because they are starting to improve. A long way to go, but we're solving more crime, Commissioner.
Thank you for that update. Going back kind of to the point of the inspection, investigations in Hertfordshire were more likely to conclude either with no suspect being identified or with a suspect identified but an unsupported victim, the national average. And some of those, as we've talked before in these meetings, are cases where you kind of do have a suspect, and potentially there's opportunities to do more to resolve that. I know it's been something you've been focusing on. What progress have you made around reducing the number of outcomes that end in one of those conclusions?
Thank you. So all crimes are nationally categorised as a different type of resolution outcomes. An outcome 18 is where the investigation is filed with no suspect being known or identified. And Hertfordshire has been identified as a slight national outlier. We do more than those than most. In 2023, there were 43% of crimes were filed in Hertfordshire as an outcome 18. The national average was 42. And in January to October this year, Hertfordshire has only marginally reduced the number of outcome 18s to 43%, and the national average has fallen to 36%. So we aren't making as much progress in this space as I would want to. It isn't a worsening position, but there is still a higher percentage in Hertfordshire than elsewhere where no suspect is identified. So that is an area of continuing focus for me. Looking for early opportunities to identify a suspect, making sure the supervisory grip and process is right. So work to do on the outcome 18s. There's a better picture on the outcome 16s. So this is where we have a named offender, but the victim doesn't wish to support an investigation. And we were a slight national outlier looking a couple of years back. Well, we've now reduced the amount of crimes in this category from nearly a quarter to 20%, so about a 5 percentage point improvement, and we are in line with other forces now in terms of outcome 16. That is where you have a named suspect, but the victim isn't supportive, that you can use things like out-of-court disposals and other restorative justice programmes to get a positive outcome, and that's where we're seeing some of the dividend in the increased outcomes that I talked about. So we're really focused on that, getting the right outcome for the victim and, of course, the offender and the public.
Thank you for that update and progress there. You touched a little bit around the plans that one of the Assistant Chief Constables is putting in place. There were some specific recommendations in the inspection from 2024 around improving supervision of investigations, ensuring that the relevant lines of inquiry were being followed. Can you just give me a bit more detail around how some of those specific points have been, are being, will continue to be addressed through that work?
They are all built into our expectation of how every single crime is investigated, how it's documented by the officer doing that investigation, and how it's scrutinised and checked by the supervisor going through that process. So a structured investigative plan on every single crime that a supervisor checks and makes sure is happening, with auditing and feedback going where we don't meet the standards required. We are seeing far greater compliance with those standards now. It is being recorded in that way, and that review in terms of the quality of how we're documenting our inquiries is reported into both the local and the constabulary performance boards, overseen by either my senior teams or the Deputy Chief Constable. So we've addressed all the points within the recommendation.
Thank you. There was a recommendation to essentially ensure that more victim needs assessments were being done. What progress has been made to ensure they are being carried out where appropriate?
Good progress, thank you, Commissioner, and a really important area that we understand what the victim needs when we're investigating a crime. So we've had an extensive training programme through 2025. 562 of my responding officers have been trained, 273 of my neighbourhood and community officers and staff have been trained, and we've also been doing work refreshing knowledge across some of our investigation teams and our crime recording teams. We've promoted and advertised it in terms of its importance and the why we need to do this to our staff through our internal intranet, through posters and similar. And as a result, we have improved. Last year, only 72% of all crimes had an effective victim needs assessment. This year we are at 84%. I'd like it to be 100% of crimes with an appropriate victim needs assessment. That's the ambition, but we have improved. We've got a process to oversee that and drive that forward, and it's making some improvements. And importantly, not only are we doing more, the quality of those assessments is improving. So we have what we call a victim services team in the constabulary, who are our experts in this space, and they review the quality of the needs assessment done by the investigators. And they've said that the needs assessments that are really good quality has increased from 36 to 58%. So we're doing more, the quality is improving, we haven't finished yet.
Thank you for that update on that progress. And as you say, it's a really important area to ensure there is that really detailed understanding of what the victim needs, which will be different in every case, won't it? So that's helpful, thank you. Perhaps just touching then a bit more on the point around those types of cases where a victim might be unsupportive of police action. You referred to some of the options available to officers in terms of trying to progress that. And one of those is kind of so-called evidence-led prosecution, particularly in domestic abuse cases and those sorts of cases where the threshold of evidence might be clear, but a victim doesn't want to take action. How's the constabulary strengthening its approach to that to ensure that offenders in those kinds of cases are held to account?
Yeah, we don't do enough of this, is my assessment, and so we are. And we have actively reviewed our process, in particular in that space of, you say, of domestic abuse investigation, where a victim doesn't, for a variety of reasons, many of which will be understandable, doesn't wish to pursue a prosecution, but we deem that there is evidence and it's the right thing to do, which is a careful balance to find. It is the right thing to prosecute the offender. We've introduced a process to do that. Now that's really fresh. I can't give you any data or evidence of improvement in that regard, but I'm really clear when we benchmark with other forces, they're quite proactive in this space, a good number of them, and they do prosecute offenders despite a victim not wishing to do so. Hertfordshire doesn't do that enough. We have an ambition to do it much more. Again, my head of public protection, a really senior officer, a detective chief superintendent, owns this, and in the coming months I expect to see the number of these types of prosecutions grow, but we haven't achieved that yet.
Thank you. We'll probably come back to it as a topic for these meetings later in the year to see how that work is going, because it is an important opportunity, as you rightly say. Thank you for those updates. I'm going to move on to Project Vigilant now, and perhaps before we get into discussing it, for the benefit of members of the public, perhaps if you could start maybe just by talking us through what is Project Vigilant.
Yes, of course. It's a really important piece of work that the public will recognise, where we know sadly that in Hertfordshire and across the country there will be individuals out there intent on harming and preying on vulnerable people, and in particular women and girls. And Project Vigilant is something that we do in Hertfordshire and will continue to do and need to do more of, and nationally, around deploying officers, usually in plain clothes, to spot the individuals based on training who might be the individuals that they just look out of place, they look wrong. You look like, because of your behaviours, you could be someone who might cause danger in terms of crime or preying on women. And that officer then will bring in uniformed officers to speak to that individual and have a conversation to find out who they are, what they're doing there, issue them with, just have a conversation, they're doing nothing wrong, but actually deal with them if there's something of more concern. So it's a proactive way of being visible in the nighttime economy, speaking to people to try and drive down violence against women and girls.
Thank you, and as you say, it's a really important tactic, and I've been able to observe officers doing it on a couple of occasions, and it is a powerful piece of work. How's the constabulary been making use of those tactics and that approach in Hertfordshire?
So, the first thing to say is we've specifically trained nearly 170 officers in what it is to deploy this tactic and how to spot those risky behaviours. So we've trained our people across the county to do this, and we have been having nights of action across the county. The logical places to do it, where we have the highest gatherings of people in that kind of nighttime economy space, so not exclusive, but Watford, St Albans, Hemel Hempstead, Hertford, and Bishop Stortford, and we've been out in the evenings doing this activity. Recently, for example, New Year's Eve, Christmas Eve, the kind of festive party season, and although we don't see a huge number of directly related arrests, there have been arrests as a result of this. There's been lots of interaction, lots of conversations happening, lots of work with our key partners, taxi drivers, nighttime economy traders, pubs, clubs, nightclubs. So the conversation is wider than just policing. So I think that's important, because it makes us all think about the importance of this work, because it's not just the police, it's that wider partnership that can make our towns and town centres a safe place. So all of that wrapped up together convinces me it's the right thing to do, and we have some really clear plans to carry it on going forward.
Thank you. And are you able to just quantify the kind of number of deployments that the constabulary has carried out? Because it's a relatively new tactic. Thames Valley, I think, trialled it first, and Hertfordshire adopted it in the last few years. So what's that look like in terms of the number of times that the constabulary has been able to kind of mobilise a group of officers to go and do that specific operation?
35 occasions so far, and we have ambitions over the next 3 months, supported by some additional resource we found to do much more.
Thank you. And you've touched around some of the intended and actual outcomes. What over-assessment has the constabulary made of its impact? It's by its nature a little bit hard to quantify. It's kind of a preventative step, but has it been possible to to understand that by putting that resource into those areas in that way, that has had a positive impact around disrupting predatory behaviour?
As you say, Commissioner, it's a hard one to measure. So if I look in terms of outcomes, well, we've been out and about in town centres on 35 occasions. There have been 3 related arrests, 45 individuals were stopped and spoken to, 12 individuals were issued with community protection warnings. But the outcome and the benefit is more than that. It's the conversations we have. So as we talk to our local partners, it's hugely positive. Engaging with groups like Pub Watch, our community safety manager, and partners in councils, there's a huge amount of positivity and support for this. We advertise this through the brilliant work of our communications department in Hertfordshire Constabulary, putting body-worn video releases out, putting news stories out, and the engagement we get back on those posts from the public is really positive. And the officers and staff tell me when they're speaking to members of the public, in particular women and girls, but actually very often, and it is often the men they're speaking to, there's a positive response back as well. So it's not scientific, but it feels the right thing to be doing, and therefore we're going to continue to do more of it.
Thank you. Project Vigilant was something that was looked at in the second part of the Angelini inquiry that came out of the tragic murder of Sarah Everard. And the inquiry's Part 2 report raised some questions nationally, not specifically about Hertfordshire, but nationally around the use of Project Vigilant, and a question about whether it is consistently resourced by policing. You referred to being able to identify some additional resources. Do you have a sort of sustainable resourcing plan to be able to deploy those tactics in proportion to the assessed need, or is that a broader challenge in terms of that standalone work?
It is a broader challenge. Our deployments thus far have been, as I've described to you, good, but perhaps a little more sporadic than I would like. We've now appointed a senior local officer to oversee and coordinate this across Hertfordshire, because I think it's an important thing to do. We've identified some resource that will mean over the next 2 or 3 months at the end of March we will maintain a really good level of op vigilant activity in our town centres. And as we work through our budgets and our priorities for next year, I'm clear to my team I want this to carry on. Now, the tactic we're talking about here can be part of our normal Friday, Saturday, Wednesday night activity. We've spoken a lot about our Operation Hotspot activity in town centres. So I want this to become part of the business as usual of how we do neighbourhood policing in Hertfordshire. So I'm confident we can get to in a world where resources are scarce, where we can keep this activity going.
Thank you very much for that, and I welcome that, because it is a really important piece of work to keep women in particular safe in the nighttime economy, and ensure our town centres are safe places for people. Thank you. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is a revisit of something we looked at in the autumn, where there was some positive signs of progress around Clare's Law disclosures, the domestic violence disclosure scheme. And it was something we said we would come back and look at to see whether that progress has been maintained in the way that you were hoping it would be. So has it?
Yes, it has. We've maintained really strong progress in this area, Commissioner. It's a vitally important area of work. In 2025, we made 3,084 Clare's Law disclosures. 3,084 individuals who we spoke to, either because they asked or they had a need to know in our judgment around an individual who was potentially posing risk to them. In 2024, that was 1,136, and the year before that, 418. So we have significantly increased the amount of disclosures we're making to largely women, because there's an evidence base that will help them stay safe. So I am really pleased with it. It's a hugely important area of work for us, and what really pleasing me as well is we're doing it quicker than ever as well.
Thank you. That is a really significant step change, isn't it, over a couple of year period, almost sort of 9-10-fold
Yes.
Increase. That's really good, and as you say, that's real risk and real people being given information about a potential partner that they can do something with. And we touched in September around timeliness of disclosures and the challenge of doing much more whilst doing it in a time frame. 28 days is the national target, I think I'm right in saying. And you're alluding to the fact that progress has been maintained on timeliness as well.
It has, and I'm really pleased. In September I told you that we turned on some technology that was giving us even more information to make even more disclosures to people, hence, and that's great, but we were catching up with the backlog of that work. Well, we've now reviewed our processes, looked at how we do our business, and we are. In September there were 599 cases that were beyond the 28 days that we have a really clear ambition to do by, because this is managing risk. In December that had fallen to 86. That's still 86 more than I would like over the threshold, but we have a system and a process to keep up with the higher level of disclosures now, increasingly within our aspiration of almost immediately.
Thank you. That's significant in terms of that coming down of the longer time frames while doing more as well. Thank you.
It's right to say, Commissioner, I should say the team in this space have done a fantastic job. They've found the technology and turned it on so we know more, and then they've reviewed how they do their business so they can speak to more people more quickly. So this is a real, as you can tell, I'm really proud of what the team have done in this space, because this is real harm prevention in Hertfordshire.
No, rightly so. That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. We touched previously around a linked but separate tactic, which is domestic violence protection orders, which can be used to put some controls around offenders and some protections in place for victims. And again, when we looked at this in September, there'd been some positive progress around both the use of them and around the management of breaches. Has that progress been maintained as well?
Yes, it has, and it's further improved. It's a really important tactic to control individuals who may pose risk to others. So in September I reported that in the 3 months, there had been 101 domestic violence protection orders issued in those 3 months. In the last 3 months, October to December, that's increased to another 141. So we're increasing our use of the tactic. October 46, November 42, December 53. So I'm seeing that gradually building position. What I'm really pleased about is every single time we went to court and asked for an order, we were granted it. So the officers are going for the right reasons with the right information, and we're being supported by the judicial system in getting that controlling order. And as a result of us using it more proactively, we're seeing more breaches. So in the 3 months just gone, we had 35 breaches. In the 3 months prior to that, we had 21 breaches. So we're using the tactic more. It's giving us more breaches, which results in intervention from policing. And so that has included things from people being fined to people being returned to prison for up to 6 weeks. So it's a really important tactic, and it's working.
What would be your reflections? There's a really great example there of significant increases in the amount of work being done and the protections being put in place. What conclusions have you drawn in terms of the approach the constabulary's taken to that can be applied to other areas of business?
I think we've always had this. We have a hugely passionate team of officers and staff, not just in this space but across the constabulary, who want to do the right things. They want to keep people safe. I think the things we've focused on and changed through the course of this year is having information at our fingertips so we can see what's happening. It's not perfect, but we're getting better information. We're really, really clear as a senior leadership team how we support our people, train our people, and hold them to account for delivery, so we understand the business really well. And we're really clear where we want to improve. So we need to use the tactic of Players' Law, disclosures. We need to use the tactic of domestic violence protection orders more because it keeps people safe. Invest the technology, invest the systems, and then make sure it's happening. So all those things, and people at the heart of it responding really positively because it's what they want to do. And I think that applies to, we could talk about the firearms licensing challenge that we're still working on. We could talk about solving more crime more broadly. We could talk about our response to what vigilant. It's knowing what our priorities are, being really clear on where we're doing well, and then holding people to account for delivering it.
Thank you. I think that's a good recipe, generally, isn't it? Thank you very much for those updates, and the team have done a really good job. as you rightly say. It's really positive to see. And that brings us to the end of the agenda for today's Accountability and Performance meeting. Thank you for those updates, Chief Constable. I hope members of the public have found the meeting useful and some of the topics that we've covered helpful and positive to hear some of the progress being made, notwithstanding areas where you want to do more or more still being done. But thank you for those updates. Now we'll close the meeting.